Doge has been ripping through the federal government and exposing waste and money laundering at an alarming and welcome speed. The agency's savings are still being calculated as I write this video on Friday afternoon, but a few days ago the estimates were already at $1 billion a day. And as Doge tore into USAID, so did a tool following your tax dollars from start to finish, and found billions of tax dollars laundered from the US government to Everytown, Brady, and Giffords. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I saw the first rumblings of this over on the Firearms subreddit, but the big picture hadn't all come together yet. Now, a team over at the National Association for Gun Rights has been digging through Data Republican, the site tracking the path of our government dollars, and has proven what people suspected for a long time, that the government, through a series of money laundering middlemen, has been funding the country's largest gun control groups. But before we get into all of that, this video today is brought to you with the help of Blackout Coffee Company. Blackout is your Florida-based coffee roaster that has a strong history of supporting the Second Amendment, soldiers overseas, and channels like mine. Not only do they have some amazing coffee, tea, and hot chocolate with the coffee being roasted to order, they also have dedicated partner roasts where some of the proceeds are donated to some of your favorite gun rights groups directly, like GOA and FPC. So to get a cup of coffee that you can be proud of, go to blackoutcoffee.com/LibertyDoll and you can use code LibertyDoll for a one-time 20% discount. So check them out to help support the channel and your rights. Now, I had never heard of this Data Republican site before, but it's been praised by, of course, the National Association of Gun Rights, Elon Musk, Charlie Kirk, Lee Williams of the Second Amendment Foundation, and other big names. In fact, Lee went through the data and confirmed it all himself. So it all comes down to this. The Dickey Amendment said that taxpayer dollars could not go towards gun control advocacy, so parties with vested interests in gun control, aka the US government, instead sent those tax dollars to a couple different organizations that then funneled them into the gun control groups. One of these examples is an organization called Neo Philanthropy, a left-wing group with over 40 years under its belt that says right on its About Us that they are a middleman between big funders and grassroots organizations that power transformation, saying they bridge the gap between big funders and organizations. Now this, in and of itself, isn't a crime, but consider that one of their major projects sits under a heading of mass criminalization, but the entire press release is a hit piece on Southern gun owners taking detours to complain about gun shows, the supposed low price of firearms, and the NRA. It repeats, literally, "I hate guns" over and over in the piece. It paints gun owners as fearful bigots. The writer even suggested the love of guns is some jittery remnant from KKK days, hoping to right all the perceived wrongs in the world by amassing guns against people of color and non-Christians. And yet, they've received millions of dollars of grants from the US government that then got sent to gun control groups. Now, the way this website lays it all out is in a series of admittedly overwhelming flowcharts that color codes the flow of money as high taxpayers funds, medium taxpayers funds, which are still between $1 and $10 million of taxpayer money, and low taxpayer funds, which is anything under $1 million. You can trace, for example, how MIT got Fed and state money and then fed it into Giffords by sending it first through Impact Assets, Inc. Going back to our example of Neo, Neo is technically in the low category. On the Everytown graph, we can see how Internews Network, a recipient of USAID funds and nearly $94 million of taxpayer money, sent money to the New America Foundation, who then sent it to Neo, who then sent it to Everytown up at the top of this screenshot, etc., etc. ad nauseum. NAGR took a screenshot of just some of the money going into Everytown, for example. Here we see a number of high taxpayer fund organizations funneling money into the middleman organizations like NEO, who then sent it to Everytown. These high taxpayer fund organizations, like the Board of Trustees of Leland, for example, get their money direct from federal government grants. You cannot tell me that they are sitting there and separating their $1.5 billion taxpayer dollars, billion with a B, from the $250,000 that they sent to the Schwab Charitable Fund, and then that none of those taxpayer dollars were included in the nearly $750,000 that they sent to Everytown. In fact, NEO itself funneled nearly $7.5 million to Everytown through a series of middlemen and USAID grants. Using the Data Republican tool, we can see that USAID sent taxpayer money via grants to the National Endowment for Democracy, Freedom House, Global Communities, and other nonprofit organizations that then funneled it to gun control groups like Control Arms. Using this tool, we can see almost $13 million going to Brady that can be traced back to the Consortium for Elections and Political Process Strengthening and their $186 million taxpayer funds that they funneled through 5 layers of charities, aka money laundering. Bloomberg's March for Our Lives got $1.4 million that started with $165 million in taxpayer funds. Sandy Hook Promise got a similar amount. Everytown got a whopping $31 million that can be traced back to government grants. Here is a zoom out of just the Everytown chart. That is a lot of red. I can do the same for Giffords, March for Our Lives, Sandy Hook Promise, and Brady. All of these organizations have paths that trace back to taxpayer money. And neo-philanthropy is just one of many organizations that are being used for this. Now, because the money changed hands a few times, it's more complicated than just saying USAID funded gun control. But follow the money. The money is going into the same pot as non-taxpayer dollars, and then that pot is being distributed to gun control. So at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter that these organizations at the end are saying, well, none of this is taxpayer money, because they have no way of knowing. The government is essentially money laundering. Now, maybe there's not someone at the government end earmarking these funds to eventually hit Brady or Everytown or Giffords or Sandy Hook, but you can't tell me that they don't know that they're funneling money into organizations that then send millions of dollars to Brady and Everytown and Giffords and Sandy Hook. Especially when you consider how hard New York Attorney General Letitia James went after the NRA for not only mismanagement of funds, but also she used taxpayer dollars to take down what many people considered the gun rights organization for a very long time. Now, you and I know that the NRA was doing some not great things and was not a great organization and was mismanaging their money and funneling it into their own shady things, but it's all too coincidental and ironic to be by accident. Sure, maybe you can argue that some of it comes down to incompetence or ignorance because this is the government after all. But with the same pattern repeated for all the major gun control groups, plus many of the smaller ones, on top of all of the ridiculous fraud and money laundering we're seeing from USAID and other government agencies thanks to DOJ, I have to believe that it's intentional, especially with the reports coming out that a lot of this is intentional. We are seeing so many reports of this money from all of these agencies getting mismanaged and people knowing it and saying, well, we're not going to change it. I mean, just look at the way that the Democrats in Congress are fighting all of these audits. They knew what was happening this whole time. Why else would they be fighting it? Why else would they suddenly be against government transparency? They want government transparency from Elon Musk, but they don't want to have it when it comes down to where our taxpayer money is going. And that should tell you something. I will continue to gleefully watch how DOJ tears this ridiculous government apart. Last I heard, there was 70 or 80,000 federal government employees that are taking the buyout because their jobs are just not actually needed. The way that this government bloat is being gutted, And we haven't even hit the tip of the iceberg, my friends. What a time to be alive. Anyways, that is it for this video. You guys know the drill for all of the algorithm things. And as always, thanks for tuning in. Stay safe out there and happy shooting.